Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dissonant Dialogues. I'm Emily, and I'm here with my co-host Claire. Claire, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Enjoying the rest of our summer. We're filming this in halfway through July, which is crazy. So
I
we're,
know.
we're getting through it. Today, we have a guest here. It's our only guest episode for season three, which is super exciting. Scott, if you'd like to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi there, everyone. My name is Scott Bass. I am a countertenor extraordinaire from Chicago, Illinois. I actually went to school with Claire, and Emily was there about for like a half a semester before I graduated. I am a gigging musician out here in Chicago. I do a lot of diverse things in my life and not just in the classical realm. And I also composed the theme song for this lovely podcast. So if you guys like the music for that you hear every time this show comes on, hit me up.
Scott is a great friend, and I can't believe we go way back now because I was thinking that this August is 10 years since we started school.
Jeez, that's true.
That's so trippy. I feel old. So, Scott is one of my very dear friends, my husband and my very dear friends, and he's got a lovely wife and a lovely baby girl. We went to your wedding, what was it,
Oh
two
yeah,
years ago?
oh yeah. 2 years actually.
Coming
two
up on
years
that.
on Monday.
Oh yeah.
It was our anniversary.
Yeah, you had any good plans for that?
Oh yeah, totally. I got her taco. That was the way to do it.
Well, it's also new parent life, so you gotta you gotta squeeze in the excitement where you can.
Truly.
Scott, we wanted to talk a lot today about sort of thoughts on music careers, the gig economy, the way that being a performer works in the 2020s versus what we were prepared for. And I thought you had some really interesting takes. So if you want to sort of give a background on, first of all, how you started as a music major, because you have kind of an interesting story there.
Yeah, totally. So I've had a very, very interesting path to getting to where I am. I actually started as a tuba player, auditioned as a tuba player, and as a singer. I didn't really know what path I wanted to go down. I was kind of leaning more towards the tuba, and so I got the same amount of money from the school, luckily for both. And I was like, okay, this gives me the opportunity to just decide and be like, okay, this is my path. This is where I'm going. And the classical instrumental world was kind of where I was thinking of more than singing, even though I love singing and I was in every group in high school and every band and every choir and every orchestra that I could be in. But then about halfway through my first semester of college, the interesting thing that happened to me when we had a joint concert with the choral program. We had a brass ensemble choral concert. Is that I met my now teacher, Mark Creighton, Claire's teacher as well. He learned that he was also a tuba player and also quit playing the tuba to sing. And so I was like, huh, this is interesting. I want to take a lesson with this guy. And I've always been really intrigued with, doing stuff that's unique with the voice. And so I eventually ended up just I took the audition piece, this Brahms piece that I had sang for my auditions and whatever, and decided I'm like,
Wait, which Brahms piece?
the melody in Citas Mir.
That was my audition
Oh,
piece.
really? That's hilarious.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So I
I
took.
love that. It's a really pretty song.
Oh yeah. I mean, all of the Brahms later,
Yeah.
great. I auditioned as a baritone with that piece, and then I decided to take it to Mark and sing it up the octave because I've always been interested. I'm like, I really wish I could learn how to sing high. I don't know if I can do this. I'm just gonna go there and see what he thinks. And eventually, did my lesson with him. He's like, you're not a baritone. You are a countertenor. You're coming to my studio. And I said, okay. And so making Charlie Shookett, the tubist from the Chicago Symphonietta, very upset because I got poached. I switched my degree, switched everything, and a lot of it was because of the expectations for classical instrumentalists were so high Like you're in a conservatory, you're expected to like on average practice 5 or 6 hours a day outside of class, outside of everything else, and learning excerpts and learning and doing everything. I'm like, how is that even possible? How do you have time to even like be alive and just be a person and study and do everything else that you have to do? And so that was a big thing that was just, irking me as an instrumental major. And I was like, this is a little too intense. And I realized, though, that switching away from it didn't really mean that I had to give it all up. But in college, it kind of was, because the school was like, you can't do any ensembles and be a singer. You can't do any choirs and be, and do the wind ensembles or anything like that. Even though somehow I had made it work where I snuck into the jazz program and played upright bass for the jazz combos and subbed in for the big band jazz just for fun because nobody told me I couldn't.
The jazz people will never narc on you.
Luckily, yeah. And well, like they all knew that I wasn't a jazz major, but they just let me in anyway. I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll take it.
I remember that was a big debate when I first started, is that a lot of our classmates, I remember them asking, they wanted to be part of jazz ensembles and wanted to do collaborations. And it was very much like, no, like it's one track here. You do not have that flexibility.
Yeah, isn't that like not common? I feel like in other music schools, I've heard stories of other people where you're welcome in other ensembles, and I think that's great.
I've heard that too. It's a mixed bag, but yeah, I do think we were more stringent. And I know it's hard because oftentimes the big ensembles are at the same time or like back to back or overlapping. So I do think that that makes some sense. And there obviously are differences in classes, but yeah, I know that they were more hesitant to let anyone have any overlap than what I've seen at other schools.
That's the biggest thing that I had. That was the biggest problem I had with just I don't know if it's just common conservatory culture or what, because you're so focused in on this is my specialty, this is my path. And in reality, in terms of being a musician, that is so opposite of everything that you actually can make a career out of, unless you are like, the greatest violist in the world and you get an orchestra job right out of college, or you go to school for another 10 years and get your performance diploma, and now you're like, oh, I'm the best person ever, and you go get an orchestra job or a college job, and it's like, where's the in between? There's so much in music that's not just here's the path to an orchestra job, because most people are not going to get that.
Now that's something we talk about a lot. And Emily, I'm curious, as a multi-instrumentalist, if you relate to any of this or feel like you got any pushback.
Oh yeah. No, I got a lot of pushback. Because I started on clarinet. And so 3 years down the line, when I was like, I really, really want to do violin, and it's that gut feeling. I knew that in my heart. I'm like, this is what's meant for me. Oh my God, the junior high band director, as we were going to enter junior high then, like refused to talk to me or my family for a solid year because she was so mad at me. And I had pushback from my friends in band. Everybody was just upset with me. And that wasn't even like professional level of like a teacher being like, it's not okay. Like I was having just close friends being like, no, it's wrong. It's like this is like instilled in us in some way that playing multiple instruments is wrong, or having like multiple sports is wrong, which now like being a private teacher for 7 years and soon to be classroom teacher, like everything I've observed is that the most well-rounded kids are the ones who do have more than one thing. Yes, it's possible for there to be too much, and then that's overwhelming and not good for your mental health, but it's also not good for your mental health to have one thing, because if something happens and you lose that one thing, you have nothing anymore. And also what you do shapes who you are as a person. So yeah, I'm always more intrigued and interested by people who have like several pathways in music, especially ones that like dip their toes in the water of like woodwinds and brass, or vocalists and violin. Like it's really cool.
Yeah, I remember you when you had your recital, how your violin teacher was surprised that you were as good on cello since you decided to add. Did you get any pushback about adding a cello piece to the recital?
Shockingly, no. She was just surprised and didn't understand. Like I asked both of my violin teachers for permission, and the younger one was like, "Oh, sure, do whatever you want to do." And then the older one was like, why? I'm like, well, because it's been a part of my life. Like cello's been in and out. Yes, I've had times where I've focused more on violin because I have a violin performance degree I'm aiming for, but it's been a part of my journey and I want to include it. It's a fun surprise. It's something different. I don't have to have my senior recital be exactly like everybody else's. Like, that's not what makes it fun. I think there's a lot more people now that are making their recitals just slightly different, doing something that's a little
Yeah.
unexpected. And I think that's awesome. I know my teacher had no idea about my cello abilities. And afterwards, she's like, that was really good. I thought you were just gonna like play the swan or something. Like, okay. Well, she was overall happy about it and she thought it was cool. It's like once you get to that point where, I was just performing a piece and it wasn't hurting, I guess, my violin ability or taking away from anything else, they were fine with it. But uh, when you're working towards it, people are more uh, want to voice their pushback at
Yeah.
that time. Yeah.
That's very interesting, actually, because I guess it's easier to add an element, like if like in terms of vocal recital versus switching your instrument completely. Because my senior recital I actually self-accompanied on a mandolin.
Oh.
I did
Yeah.
a little short Mozart art song that was written for
I remember that.
yeah.
Yeah, because Joe did a little bit of an accompaniment for his senior recital on banjo. I had to bring it out for him, so he did I think it was one of the Blue Mountain ballads with banjo. So there is a little bit. Once you've got your foot out the door, then they'll let you have some freedom.
That's true.
Yeah, I love that though. I think that's very in the spirit of these eras and these composers that we're supposed to respect and honor as our masters constantly, and forget that, like, okay, these people were silly, honestly ridiculous humans who played music casually for fun, and that the language of music was kind of a common parlor room thing that you could sit around and accompany yourself, and that people had a baseline knowledge of casual instruments and chords and figure bass. And I think we've really lost that spirit in the need to specialize, which I think gets into the gig economy and the realities that teachers are just unprepared for
Truly.
today. Yeah.
It's interesting. So like in the multi-instrumental realm, right? I've learned how to play guitar and bass guitar and tuba, obviously, and all this other stuff when I was in middle and high school, and stuff that I couldn't really use in going into this classical degree that I didn't think I could use, at least. And then, going through the repertoire, being able to use a lot of my own self-study, producing music, composing, stuff like that, using stuff that I'm like, oh, I got like a little bit of extra skill by learning music theory and, doing the rest of that, group piano, stuff like that, which was helpful. But then a lot of it was so much outside of that scope of, this is you are a classical singer, you sing this is your repertoire, this is your voice type, this is where you're going, this is how you're going to do it, period.
Something that Emily and I have talked about a lot is like the cultural difference between the singer world and the instrumentalist world. The can the musicians and the singers please come back to the stage in 5 minutes? So I'm just curious of your perspective, having dipped your toe in both worlds. Like, what were the biggest cultural differences between the two?
Oh, I mean, it's almost like a discipline thing. That is the main thing. Instrumentalists have so much of this, like, ingrained, like, you will do this, you will practice every single note 3 times over, or else you're completely wrong, or like. But then again, there's more focus on the actual technical aspects, knowing all your scales, knowing all how to make an arpeggio happen, basics of music theory that are ingrained into the actual performance aspect, rather than with singers. You kind of like, oh, you show up, you learn solfege, you figure out how to sight read. Most people don't. There's a lot of even professional singers that I know that are really bad at sight reading. And
I struggled. Look, I struggled a lot.
But then again, with an instrumentalist, it's like, oh, you don't have to know how to, like, you don't need to know what an interval is. You just need to know where you put your finger, or in the brass, like where to buzz. And that it makes it a little bit easier in that sense, where you don't have to think as much in terms of the actual line of the music, besides just phrasing, stuff like that, because
you don't have to take 3 languages.
Place, well, that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't have to memorize any words.
That too. Yeah, well, then that for sure is, you don't have to memorize really anything if you're an instrumentalist in most
That's true.
settings, unless you're, like playing like pop violin for a wedding and you're just like up there just jamming out.
Shredding.
It's really an interesting difference. There's definitely the trope of like, oh, the soprano who doesn't know anything but has really good notes, really good high notes. That's,
Yeah.
It's accurate enough. Because like
it's a weird instrument because you can't start as young as you can with physical instruments that aren't the body. So you get a lot of people who have not had as much of a theory background and things like that. You also can't practice for the same number of hours or in the morning at all because your voice is just phlegm. So there's a physical limitation that I think leads to that stereotype of singers being behind. You're one of the only singers I knew who could pass out of a lot of theory, who can sight read in their sleep. You're kind of known for being able to do all of that. Definitely helped a lot of us scrape our way by in theory class and stuff like that. I didn't know, I can't think of anyone else who was able to test out of as much as you did.
I definitely didn't do any.
Cannot put that in there.
I didn't do it. I don't know. It is interesting though, because of the fact that with an instrumentalist, you can't hurt yourself by playing wrong.
Well,
and
you
can't
can overuse injuries happen.
Yeah, tendonitis and stuff like that. But you can't like lose your career completely just by, playing. I mean, playing too much, sure, but not just by playing the wrong way. If you hit the wrong fret in the guitar, it's just gonna sound bad. But you're not gonna, get nodes and then lose your ability to play forever and ever and ever.
It's true. That is true. Although Emily had that concern with her wrist surgery years ago.
Oh God,
yeah. So
yeah,
but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I absolutely see what you're saying. Yeah, my case was a little more complicated, where it's like, yeah, if you're playing like physically wrong or you're just naturally, I don't know what the word is, but it just was kind of like the way that my muscles and my body was that was like going to happen. But yeah, I could see where like that's something that scares me with like vocalists. It's like you guys get sick. Oh man, I get worried if I'm gonna get sick and like, oh, I'm not gonna feel good when I play, but like that's a whole other thing.
I mean, I had mono like my entire freshman year, so and switched Fox too, so that was a weird time. Well, okay, sorry, we're getting off on tangents, but for the people who don't really know, can you tell us what a countertenor is?
Sure. So, little short snippet. Countertenors are a modern version of what a couple hundred years ago, people would write vocal parts for male voices, usually for boys' choirs in the church setting. And so they would have these prepubescent boys sing alto and soprano parts. The countertenor is a way that male vocalists who have the ability and the freedom in their head voice range to sing in the alto or soprano range. There are a couple different kinds of countertenors. There are lower, more dramatic voices. There are higher male sopranos. But typically it is a cisgender male who has a high vocal ability. And in that sense, it's a lot of people think, oh, but you're really just a tenor, you're really just a baritone. But it actually comes from the timbre of the voice, the timbre being the color, if you don't know. For me, in my modal voice, I have a very typical, almost baritone-ish range from low F, an F2 under the staff, to a, E or an F or a G above the staff, which would be a G4 in the full chest, full musculature range. But in the fullness of the entire range, I can hit anywhere from a G to a B flat 5, so above the treble clef staff. And it has the same amount of power as, or even more than, some like female born singers, just because of the way the chords are structured, just because there's more musculature and more space in the body as a broader chested male human person. There's a lot more that goes into that vocal production that gives it a more darker, ethereal sound. comparable to like a female contralto, which has this really dark, foreboding energy. It's a very interesting overlap because it's similar to the contralto, where it's not really seen as like a typical voice type. There's a lot of overlap in that, where like low voiced women or even female tenors that exist, which there are plenty, especially as women get into their older age and postmenopausal and their voice gets lower and lower and lower, is not seen as legitimate. And only until the 1960s, where this voice type started to gain more traction in the opera world with singers like Alfred Deller and Russell Oberlin, did this voice kind of become more seen as, normal-ish compared to the Pavarottis or the Placido Domingos and like these bigger, tenor baritones who have dominated the last like 200 years of operatic singing. And trajectory is going, more and more historical performances being done, and so male altos and male sopranos are being used for what was typically written for them by Handel and Bach and these more early classical, late Baroque composers who were writing for these castrati pop stars that existed, like Farinelli. It's become like a sort of renaissance in terms of people being able to use this voice type in a professional setting rather than just, oh, this is a guy who can sing high, or they're forced into voice types that they are honestly should not be singing in. I do a lot of multiple Fach performances where I sing
You do
tenor roles and a lot of tenor work, choral work, solo work, etc. And people are like, oh, like you're like a real tenor, like you're you have this, this, and this. I'm like, I have a fuller voice up there, but it's not tenor quality at all. It doesn't have that same like ring and fullness that like a real tenor has. Even if I can sing the note and it's powerful and it's strong, it still sounds like when I flip up there, it sounds like an alto. It does not sound tenor-y.
No, it doesn't sound like falsetto.
No.
No, because it's not. It's full. It's full. And I think what I've heard a lot of people describe the countertenor voice is it's got a metallic quality.
Sure.
And I think there's a ring to it that to me is something you don't hear in a cisgender female singer quite as often. It's got that bell-like quality, which lends itself really well to the Baroque era. And I also know, a lot of roles overlap with mezzos, but what sort of things do you sing? What sort of roles are there?
Yeah, so I mean, in the opera world, it's still few and far between. There are more modern composers writing specifically for the countertenor voice in terms of just really contemporary opera, in terms of Philip Glass, Akhenaten, or Galileo Galilei, that are written specifically for certain types of countertenor. Or going back to the '60s would be Benjamin Britten's *Midsummer Night Dream*. That's that's like the big one, is Oberon in *Midsummer Night's Dream*. With that, though, there's a lot of opportunity for orchestral solo performances in terms of like the Bach Magnificat, like the Handel's Messiah, like pretty much any of the Bach Passions or masses, even into early Mozart. I've actually sung a bunch of Mozart Missa Brevi, Missa Brevises, that for the alto solo they'll choose a countertenor, just because in that era it wasn't typical really to have a female singer. And not to we love female singers, we all do, so it's interesting to be able to have roles that can overlap, or that they can choose not just based on this guy this is a guy, so we're gonna put him in the tenor role, or this is a girl, so we're gonna put her in the soprano role, and actually utilize more of that versatility. And so in that too, there's also one of the biggest things that I do is Bernstein wrote the
Chichester Psalms.
Exactly. Chichester was written for boy soprano because it was written for English boys choirs, but he specifically wrote, if not sung by a boy soprano, this should be sung by a countertenor. And
Mm-hmm.
so in a rare instance of a recognition of that voice type versus, like, oh, this is just a high solo. It's, it sits on a high E, maybe give it to a soprano, give it to whoever. No, he wanted it specifically just for that timbre
Mm-hmm.
and just for that color that the voice can bring. And so it's very interesting.
Thank you for getting into all of that, because there's just so much that just isn't well known, and it is such a special voice type. So going into the experience of your musical career, how did your perception of what a musical career change over the course of your degree? What were you taught that it should look like? And at what point did you sort of realize that your jobs would have to diverge from that expectation?
Oh, well, it's crazy because the idea, like, going into the voice degree, it's like I went in not even thinking classical. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be a good singer, so I'm going to get my degree in voice so I can utilize this instrument as much as I can, as much as possible. But because of that, because of the world that especially conservatory life enters you in, you're like, oh, no, it's classical all the time. There's no overlap, especially with our school, that we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have any crossover between musical theater community. We had no crossover even with the instrumentalists, really, besides, music history classes and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So it was really like almost jarring. Like, it's like, oh, I now I'm an opera singer. Now that's the only thing I can do and I have to do for 12 hours out of my day. That's the only thing. For someone who really came from a more varied background, especially I was in like punk bands in high school, in a cappella groups, and like doing all, I did a lot of musical theater and musical theater pit orchestras and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, so none of that world coincides with this. And so
Mm-hmm.
here you go. You're getting into school, you're doing your degree, you're going to get your degree, and then you're going to do either, the wake up call for my voice type is, oh, young artist programs don't care about countertenors. So you're not even going to go through that route, which is what most voice students would end up, doing after college. You get into a young artist program and then you get into, Sarasota Opera or something. And then you're off to the races and you have a career and whatever. For me, it was like, okay, you're going to go through school. You're going to audition as much as possible, see where you can get in, try to just network with as many people as possible, and wait till you're 40 while your voice matures, and then maybe you'll have a career after that. So you just keep training and like, okay, what am I supposed to do from 23 till 40 then?
How do I
And
make money?
yeah. And I love my teacher to death. And he's like, before I got the career, I was working at Burger King. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not really ideal for me, though. I don't really want to work at Burger King for 15 years while my voice is developing. And so, and the lucky thing with the countertenor voice is like, my voice has gotten huge over the last couple of years. I'm 28
It's
now.
true.
But even before then, like, it was like good enough to be able to get jobs doing whatever. I was a section leader at a church, and I was singing it with professional Jewish choirs, and I was, and luckily after school got out and a couple years passed and my voice had developed, I had auditioned for, Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra and did an audition for Chicago Symphony Orchestra and did an audition for, whatever, sending out tapes to whatever opera companies I could. And a lot of companies just kind of shove you off. They're like, okay, whatever. We don't hire countertenors. We don't really care, like, if you're good or not. We just don't do that. So
Mm.
like that path of like, okay, get your degree and wait was like just so like backwards. And
Yeah.
it kind of forced me to be like, okay, well, let me fall back on everything else musical I have in order to actually make something that is doable and I can still continue to use my voice and to teach and to learn more within the industry that's not just this niche.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When do you think you figured that out? Was that after college or kind of during?
It's probably during. It's a lot of like false promises, I guess, of like, oh, you're so good. You're gonna get into the right place and you're gonna go to Europe and you're gonna get a career and well, I'm like, okay, but like where do I start? Like,
Yeah.
how do I set that foundation to get that professional career that you're saying that I'm good enough to get, you know?
And do you even want that
Yeah,
pathway? I
exactly.
know Joe struggled a lot with that, where he was like, I want to sing folk music, I want to sing blues, I want to write stuff. And I remember his coach told him, she was like, you have a serious voice, and I want you to know that if you want this, you can do this, as though any other musical use of his musical abilities was a waste, was a
Yeah.
lower profession. And that's very tragic to me, because these art forms the classical education should be a foundation on which you can build any style healthy while protecting yourself. I think that goes for any instrument. You get the musical background, the foundation, and you can do anything. I'm sure, Emily, you would probably be able to second that.
Hmm. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think in the instrumentalist world, we hear the saying a lot, those that can't do teach, and that just like
Mm.
drives me crazy because that is not the way to go into teaching. I could go on that for forever. It takes a very special quality for you to love and enjoy and be a good teacher. But that's something that I know I'd been told, and I know some violinists like much more capable than me, even that who are still solely performers and have so-called, made it, have been told that they would only be good to be a teacher. Or even I heard one say, you can be a really good teacher, but only for the younger ones. Like you can get them set up really well, but once they get to a certain age, don't try to teach them. Just let them go to somebody else. I was like, whoa, that's really
That's rough.
so yeah,
No.
yeah, we hear that.
And to like hear that between 18 and 22, I honestly, I don't think anyone has reached their full potential in life enough to make that call in any capacity. I think that's selling people so short.
Yeah, no, I'll say like I was told stuff like that at 19 when I was like 1 year into conservatory. And I changed so much and grew so much
Yeah,
since then. So it's like
of course. And you're going to
crazy.
keep, like we all are. That's where that's ridiculously limiting.
Well, and that dichotomy, that saying is so like backwards because, oh, you can't play your instruments, so you should just teach it. It's like, or you can't be a professional, so you should just teach. If you're not good enough to do things, even on like the quote unquote professional level, like sure, you're not, playing with, the London Symphony Orchestra at 19, but you still have to be good enough to be able to teach somebody.
Right.
Like you can't just go in and it's like, oh, I suck, I'm just gonna teach me lessons. Like that doesn't make any sense.
No, that has never made sense to
Yeah.
me either.
Then again,
So, oh, go ahead.
then again,
Mm.
I did fail group piano once. That entire, like, only one person out of our entire class that semester passed. But I do teach kids piano lessons, so maybe I should.
I had 11 years of piano and failed it because the group setting is just not conducive to learning anything that you need to know, even though I knew, like, until I literally forced the school to create a solo piano. Like it was me and two other people who like, well, did you take solo lessons eventually, or were
No,
you okay?
I, I
Yeah.
I probably was out of there by the time I got out of there.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I forced them to do a one-on-one thing, because I was like, my skills will never line up with this format. And I think that the way that piano is handled is one of the most poorly
Yeah.
organized
You know what? That
aspects.
just made me realize, Claire, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I actually did that as well for one semester. It was my last semester of piano. I'm trying to remember why. I genuinely think the reason why I had a solo piano lesson was because they couldn't fit it into my schedule because it was
Yeah.
so, which is like really bad. You know that means the schedule is intense. But I was lucky to have a piano teacher that said, what is your goal with piano? And I was like,
Yes.
well, I want to teach. Like, that's my goal. I want to be teaching kids and I want to teach through Suzuki books as well. I need to be able to accompany them. And so she's like, all right, let's get some like the Suzuki accompaniment music. We worked on that. And I think that was just the best thing ever.
The reason that we learn piano is because it's a kind of good universal instrument to help you, one, learn to, if plunk out your part if you need to, sort of help accompany yourself. And because of the linear nature, I think it can make it a good foundation for understanding music. But ultimately, the reason they teach piano to everyone is so that's it's the third part of your musicality. Your musicianship courses are your oral, your written, and your piano skills. And so I think what is relevant to learn in piano is whatever helps you in your primary instrument. So therefore, anything that is not relevant to your goals and that is not helping your primary instrument or even secondary instruments is just a poor use of time. And I say that as somebody who loves piano. It was the first instrument I ever fell in love with. It is the way, like, I understand notes in a very linear way because of it. If I'm sight reading, you'll see me doing things with my fingers, like, plunking out the intervals. Am I anywhere near as good as 11 years of childhood experience should have made me? No, because I got into composition and playing by ear. And I was lucky enough to have teachers who understood that that was a valuable skill to me and that there were certain things that I would never be prolific at. And I do think it's one of those things that is a music, like not just our program, conservatories everywhere are like, this can't be done well, so we won't even try. Group piano is horrible, so these kids better be good enough to survive without really needing to be structured well in a class.
Yeah, I think I got lucky because the person who came in for my last 2 semesters was a former dean of the school who kind of said, "Screw it, do what you want."
As much as you're comfortable with, can you sort of summarize what makes up your musical income now?
Sure. Yeah. So now, way post college, which is crazy to think, like,
I
uh,
know.
and post pandemic, a lot of the stuff that I do to make a career happen, luckily, uh, besides just doing smaller choruses and smaller choirs, which I feel like is an overlooked aspect of singing jobs. Like, yes, you don't need to be in a major orchestra or a major, institution to be able to make it. If you can find a local chorus that is willing to put up with you or willing to pay you, like, it makes a big difference. And so, being a ringer for a non-professional choir, which is one of the main things that I do, actually has a lot. There's a lot of opportunity there. Then you
Yeah.
gain these relationships with these people, and then they sponsor you to do other things, and then you make all these connections. Besides that, I also produce music and publish my own compositions and stuff like that, which helps bring in a little bit of income. And I'm looking into doing sync licensing and stuff like that, where you can use your own compositions to actually pitch them to as background music for shows and for media that's not just, oh, here's this performer, and also songwriting for other people. And so I've done a couple of songs like that. Nothing crazy big. Here's a song that I have. Let me give this to you and do what you will with it.
Yeah.
That brings in more opportunities and stuff like that as well. And doing commissions. I play in the most random places. Like I'll just get asked to, here, play bass for a gig next week, and I'll be like, okay, and just learn a bunch of cover songs, or I'll learn, someone else's original music, and just be able to diversify to be able to actually, just piece together an income. That being said, I also
Yeah.
sing with a major orchestra, luckily, but they don't pay actually anything really. So that's kind of the problem. Like it's going more towards is like a lot of these even bigger institutions are not hiring like a full roster of professional singers. It's like mostly volunteer, and it's kind of like just the clout of the organization is why you would sing with them. But then giving opportunities to a select few to actually make a little bit of income as a singer, even though, and that's just an American problem in general. We don't have state funding for really any institution. So you
Right.
get into a major orchestra as a instrumentalist, you're buying a house, you're making a great income. If we get into a major institution as a singer, you're like, cool. That means I can buy another, a hot dog down the street. That's unfortunately like that's also that dichotomy of, oh, singers aren't musicians,
Yeah.
and so singers are treated like we can be paid significantly less because we're all jonesing for a job. Unfortunately, even though
Uh,
that's the case in any music field, but
yep.
because you're a
Yep.
singer, it's like, oh, whatever. even a good singer.
Capitalism ruins everything, folks.
Yeah, truly, truly, truly. I, getting little gigs here and there, trying to, I've done an opera before, not many, just because there aren't really any many small companies, and the big companies are hiring out people who already have agents and already have representation, and that's unfortunately also really hard to find as a singer because you can send as many tapes to everyone. They're like, "Oh, we're not looking for singers right now. Oh, we already have a full roster. There's our singers right now." I don't know how many agencies I have contacted that are like, "Oh, well, oh, we loved your performance. You were so good, but we don't have any room for singers. Sorry." I'm like, and that was after I had been like praised by, this guy who was an agent who for some really really big people. I'm not going to say that they were like, "Oh my gosh, you were amazing, but I can't help you." I'm like, well, that's nice. I appreciate that. It's a career that's faced with a lot of rejection and a lot of just perseverance through just being like, okay, well, this is my thing. I'm just going to do it. Whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the diversity, I think, is your superpower, because I know a lot of us, I know myself, I don't have as many skill sets as you do. I think you're a rare bird in that way. But I think that's where our institutions need to be more aware of what the gig economy looks like today in this day and age, and the realities of the fact that we can't afford to wait until we're 40. We can't afford to be pay to sing at young artist programs and in volunteer orchestras and choirs over and over and over again. And this idea of any deviation from what we prepare you to is almost a moral failing, a betrayal of your education, is really doing young artists a big disservice, and is leading, I think, to just unprecedented burnout that we're seeing. I think how many of our peers that we went to school with are just have nothing to do with music in this day and age, because they just feel like, I can't even get my foot in the door. And that's a real shame, because I have tremendous respect for the artists that I studied with and for the voice that they had in our community and for the stories that they have to tell. And it's something I'm very, very passionate about, because I don't want one type of person to be the only artist to represent our art form.
Mm-hmm.
It's art. It needs to be as diverse as the human experience. And if we don't have that, we're not going to be telling the stories or connecting with people the way we should be.
And truly, I think that it's interesting that you say that because especially I know from performance classes and stuff like that when we were in school is that they want you to be in this box of good singers look like this, they act like this, they don't do this, they don't do that. And it's even to the point that's like I'm a larger guy, and it's really sad to say that because a lot of countertenors that get hired, except for like the biggest one, except for the biggest one that's in Chicago currently, but most of them around the country are these very skinny, very like typical like looking males, the beauty standard. They're very beautiful men, and it's uh it's funny because opera in the classical scene used to be like, oh, anyone who is good enough can be on the stage. That's the whole stereotype of the fat lady,
Yeah.
the fat lady singing. And now it's like, no, like it's unfortunately going a similar route to musical theater where,
Yeah.
you have to be this supermodel in order to actually get roles. And I think it's even worse now, even though we praise diversity in our institutions all over, that we are, still kind of forced to be. You can be diverse, but you can't be fat, you can't look weird, you can't dress weird, you can't act any other way besides stand there like a robot in the typical way that people have been singing for the last 40 years, or else you're never going to get.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. We're fighting the fact that opera is a dying art form, and the interest in the classical music community has gone down by trying to compete with 4K cameras and close-ups, and the fact that you're right, like the beauty standard is kind of bizarre to see. Like they're too thin, too fat. First of all, Scott, you're a beautiful man.
Oh,
Just
thanks.
never forget it. But you're right. Like it is weird. I'm curious, Emily, is there similar stuff with physical appearance? Oh, well, you've talked about the arms before.
That just came straight to my head. Yeah. Comments like, playing like this, like you have to make sure your arms are toned because if your arm like wiggles here, people will be looking at that and be distracted. And that's just so, like when I was told it, I was just younger. So I was like, okay. And now I'm sitting here and I'm like, when have I ever looked at a person and been like looking for their flaws or been like, oh, I'm seeing this body part and it's distracting and I stare at it? Like, that's not what we do. And if anyone's thinking about that and can't focus on the music, I think that's a problem for themselves.
That's the personal problem.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of, it's interesting in terms of orchestral jobs, right? Like the thing that got more diversity into orchestras was the blind audition, right? Like people would just play behind a screen and it's only about the music itself. And then when you're hired, it doesn't matter what they look like. You played well enough, better than, the 200 other people that you auditioned with that day. With singers, there's no such thing as a blind audition. Like
That's true.
you have to present, you have to do
Mm.
audio and video recordings in every audition's like you need a very high quality recording of yourself, and so you have to have the look, you have to have
Well, you're
every,
acting too. So
yeah.
it's there is a reality to the fact that you are physically embodying
Oh, sure.
a character. And also opera's full of stock characters. We are typecast more than I think any other like performance, like more than theater, more than musical theater. Like
Well, yeah.
your voice type and your physical appearance completely dictate what kind of roles you get.
Well, yeah, you can have the greatest voice in the world, but if you're a woman who weighs like 180 pounds or more, you're gonna be an old grandma,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
like it's really sad to say that, but it's
Yeah.
like there's so much more that can be done, because
Yeah.
like these roles aren't written for, oh, you have to look this way. It's just years, hundreds of years, it could be even, of traditionally like, oh, well, this role is not this lady, or you can't look like that and play this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's still done well for like diversity in terms of like race and stuff like that, which is great, but then they're still typecasting even then. It's like, oh, you mean my black tenor friend can only be in Porgy and Bess, like that says a lot about our society. He still has to be like skinny and good looking to even get that, and
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
he is, he's a great guy. But but no, it's I don't know, it's a really interesting world we're in. That's all I gotta
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to teachers, professors today in music about how they need to do their homework and what was missing that you had to teach yourself?
I think that the biggest thing is to not allow people to put you in a box, right? And teachers to allow that diversity to come through in their teaching. Because say like, for example, me, right? Like if I had a teacher, if I had a performance, like a space to perform that said, "Hey, you can incorporate all this other stuff that you're doing. You can incorporate musical theater. You can incorporate contemporary pop music. Like, why is a voice degree mean you only have to study classical music?
Mhm.
You know, like there's a whole world of, unless you're majoring in musical theater, you're not gonna be singing, anything that's outside of 200 years plus older, or classical contemporary music, atonal music that nobody listens to. And so like you're like, you want people to get music degrees, you want people to study, but it's like you need to make it just like opera. You need to make it more appealing to the masses. That's, I think, the reason why opera in general is kind of on the decline, while musical theater is on the incline. It's because musical theater is incorporating rap and rock and pop, and they have been doing it for the last 100 years. Once you get out of the golden age of musical theaters, like in the 30s and the 40s, you're like incorporating all of this stuff, all this music making from non-traditional sources, and people
Yeah.
love it, and then they continue to love it, while
Yeah.
opera keeps going weirder and weirder, or just completely like off the rails because they want to show off how smart they are as composers. instead of making something that just sounds good and is going to stick in people's ears. You can still sing things with classical intent without it needing to be like, oh, this high art that needs to be held at a standard, you know?
I think that's something that we Emily and I come back to over and over again, is that classical music, opera, orchestral, anything was at one point new music, and was at one point innovative and inspiring and edgy. And the fact that we treat it as this untouchable, higher than, the highest sort of art form that has no breath, no life to it, no rebellion, no edge, we lose our ability to connect with audiences. And the fact that these compositions, they tell stories that were relevant to the human experience 200, 300, 400 years ago, and can still be relevant to the human experience. But if we focus so much on performing for other performers, we forget who our audience is. And no wonder patrons feel more and more disconnected from these art forms, which is a real shame, because I'm personally very passionate. I love some of the classics too. I absolutely believe in championing new works and more diverse composers and all of that too. But yeah, we all have our attachments to the classics. And I think our leaders in these industries are really doing everybody a disservice by being all of this, like, it's so high and mighty.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting is we focus on you go into your music theory 4 courses and you're looking at, like serialism and postmodernism and all this like Schoenberg-esque stuff gets to a point where it's just, it's like the modern art scene where it kind of gets like, this is absurd to be absurd, but it's smart. And like if you look at the composers that actually have like hit the zeitgeist in the right way, that are classical composers that are still in the minds of the everyday people that don't study music. You have like Bernstein wrote West Side Story. West Side Story
Right.
is an opera. Like yes, no, it's not like considered an opera, whatever. And Candide's considered an opera, even though it's the same thing, exactly the same thing, except West Side Story is sung by musical theater majors, but opera singers don't. Even though, and same thing with like Les Mis. Les Mis is musical theater, but that is an opera through and through. It's completely through composed. It's completely sung in a classical style, and people latch onto it. That unfortunately is dying too, because then the musical theater is also kind of putting people in a box, or you kind of have to sound like Kristen Chenoweth, or else you're not gonna get a role. I loved Kristen Chenoweth.
We don't have to belt everything, people.
No.
We don't. That is not the only way to convey emotion. And
No.
particularly if you're going to teach it, you have to teach a technique behind it, because if you just tell people to imitate a sound, they're going to hurt themselves.
Well, they
so that's my musical theater soapbox.
Well, and so it's, like you're teaching people, okay, scream, and then if you screw it up, then you take lessons. It's like, no, that's not the way you should do this. But that being said, though, right, we should look at composers like that existed that we don't really study very often, even though they're major composers that hit the zeitgeist on the head, that are still remembered, like Gershwin. He incorporated jazz into classical music. Like Bernstein, he incorporated jazz into classical music. If you can incorporate this, these more contemporary styles that people actually want to listen to, it will actually resonate with people. And then you're not just stuck in this box of, oh, I am this classical guy. I am an opera singer. I sing. I am this just better than you, like mentality, which is so just backwards to me. And I feel like if more incorporation of that could be done in these degrees to actually get people working, because people actually are going to be doing genres that people want to listen to, rather than just because you're in college and you need to be educated, so you need to be this, like, it's the same thing with like people who go to art school. It's like, oh, you need to do the weirdest thing and tape a banana to the wall to fight society. But no, like the people who are actually using their art degrees are making cool graphic design and incorporating like meaning into what normal people would actually use and utilize in their everyday lives. And so yeah, that's my soapbox about the over scholarism of this genre that we unfortunately live in.
Well, I think there's a reason we keep coming back to it even on this podcast, is it's important, and it ultimately will save us, but only if we can get out of the pathway of the powers that currently exists.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you, as we're wrapping up a little bit, talk a little bit about the unexpected ways that your classical skill set has been applied to other kinds of music, other types? Like, what
Oh
techniques
yeah.
have you been able to employ?
Well, the nice thing, right? Like I know you were talking about earlier, like using piano as a skill to actually coincides with what you're actually majoring in. The fact that I can
Mhm.
play major keys and all 12 keys makes lessons so much easier. You can actually, accompany yourself for doing vocalises and stuff like that. But the actually like using music theory and understanding the different like how chords fit together, why these certain chord progressions are actually sound good together, it brings a new aspect to your compositions. I'm not a very good piano player in any sense of the word, but I can play every chord known to man because I know, oh, every minor chord is this, every major chord is this, every diminished chord is this, and I can understand how they work in sequence so that you can really go anywhere with your music. You can still have simple melodies as long as you know your chords and you know the chord relationships. You can use that in order to actually build upon even the simplest of things and make something brand new and beautiful out of it. And so yeah, it's one of those things. It's like you don't expect to be able to do that in real life and like utilize music theory. It's like, oh, like music, well, shouldn't music just sound good and like do what sounds good to you? It's like, oh, but knowing how that got to the point where it sounds good, or the why it sounds good. I mean, that's my kind of my spiel. I don't know.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I had two questions I was kind of going to wrap up with, and these are a little more existential and
Oh
personal.
god.
What would you say fuels you artistically?
Oh man. Well, what fuels me as an artist is the ability to move people, right? I think even with the simplest things, you're singing a melody from 200, 300 years ago that everyone knows, you're singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And if you hit the right vibe, if you hit the right, you know, like emotion, it gets people so filled in their heart, and it just seeing that, even it's something like, oh, it's like when you were in our heads all the time as musicians, we're like, oh, oh, I have to play this, I have to make sure my fingering's right, I have to make sure this note is correct, and I'm crescendoing here, decrescendoing here. But like at the end of the day, none of that matters when you're an audience member, when you see it executed and you just get that feeling of, okay, this is such an innate human experience that really brings so much more than just all the thoughts that are in your head and the things that the performance are just obsessing over while they're singing. People coming up to you and being like, wow, like this changed me, this changed my mood, this changed my mind, this changed everything about my day. And it's like, then all of that strips away, all the anxiety, all the self-doubt, all the, what am I going to do, what if I miss this note, what if I sang the wrong word? Nobody knows, nobody cares as long as it moves you. And I think there's a truth
Yeah.
to, like, if you get 70% of notes right in a performance, no one's going to remember the wrong ones. But then it's
Yeah.
true. It's like,
Yeah.
it's everything is based on moments. Like you can like just completely like poop out something terrible, but as long as you have the one moment in that piece where it's like, wow, it really everyone will forget about the poop, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's nothing wrong with striving for excellence, but if we lose sight of what music really is, then the excellence means nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and our final question, do you think your degree was worth it? Would you do it all over again?
you know I think I would do it again, but I would think I would do it in a different capacity, right?
Mm.
I kind of regret not going the music education route, just because having that as a fallback is so useful, to be like, okay, I can teach, I can teach at a school setting. I can, make a little more money rather than just doing private lessons or just doing whatever. I do think that the degree is worth it because of the amount of knowledge and the amount of mainly the amount of networking you can do, because like the people who are teaching at these higher levels know a lot of people, and if
That's
you can
true.
and if you can schmooze if you can schmooze the right people, it can open you up for the opportunities that
We should have schmoozing class.
honest yes. No, and that's something that I was gonna say. Like that's something that should be taught in degrees is like how to network properly, how to market yourself correctly. Because
Why we had a whole episode on it.
yeah, exactly. Because it's just so like it's so backwards. It's like okay, you can be as good as possible, but you can be terrible. But if you know how to network correctly, you can get majorly far in a career just being terrible.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We see it.
I didn't say that.
I did.
Like being surrounded, not even from the professorship aspect, but surrounded by other people who are in the same boat, who are skilled musicians, I think is even more important than even the education aspect of it. Just because you can find kinship in like this is all that we want to do and this is all that you want to do. That's how art can be made, is like through people who actually have this desire to create and to be high level artists and stuff like that.
It is true. I think the people that I met, the people that I studied with, I feel a very sacred connection to people like you, people, like the rest of our friends, where I'm like, okay, you were in it. It's a weird experience. And if you meet someone else who's gone through it, you guys might not always be compatible, might not always get along, but something fundamentally about like, oh, if you majored in music, do you need how's therapy going?
Yeah, truly.
I think you had great responses.
I appreciate you guys for having me on. Thank you. It's been a lovely conversation. I'm always glad to work with you guys. And,
well, we appreciate you for being the composer and for being so supportive, and I'm so glad we finally got to have you on.
Oh yeah, thank you.
If you want to give people the socials, the ats, where to find you, plug your music, all that fun stuff.
Sure. So if you want to follow any of my classical stuff, I am at Scott Bass Countertenor on Instagram and Facebook and all your fun things. I also have scottbasscountertenor.com, which is where you can find recordings and all the links to all of my socials. I also have music on Spotify and stuff under both my name, Scott Bass, and under the name Bass, Base with a period. It's that's where I do a lot of my stuff and my compositional work at base.productions with a Z on Instagram and Facebook and all your favorite social medias, and find me on all your favorite streaming services and hit me up for commissions if you want some music. Anyway, yeah.
All right, thank you for listening. If you have any feedback, you can reach us at dissonantdialogues@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 872-216-9032 with feedback. Also, if you'd like to be a guest or if you have any topic ideas or questions for us, give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok. We're Dissonant Dialogues on those platforms, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank
We'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye.
I have a cat.
Oh.
I could talk for a million years about myself. That's the problem with being a singer, is that we're, very focused. I can say that. It's fine.
No one look at the Venmo transaction history.
No.
Definitely not mine.
No, never.
Oh, I didn't know that's what you were talking about.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, off of the classified topics.
No offense to Claire, who is a very dark, foreboding energy, but
honestly, thank you. First of all, Scott, you're a beautiful man.
Oh,
just
thanks.
never forget it. Never forget it.
Oh, I am this classical guy. Tape a banana to the wall. To fight society.
What is good? What is sound?
Everyone will forget about the poop.